For those of you who are just joining us, my name is Jack Patterson. I am the Operations Administrator with the Opioid Response Unit within the Colorado Attorney General's Office. And so part of my work is supporting the 19 regional opioid abatement councils, as well as the state Colorado Opioid Abatement Council, which is the primary oversight entity of the opioid settlement funds here in Colorado. So the theme of today's session is regional operations. So as I mentioned in the last session, Colorado is a bit unique in its model for how funds are managed, right? A lot of states have funds split between local governments and the state, kind of 50-50. Colorado, the state and local governments receive just 30%, actually closer to about 20% of funds. The 60 to 70% of funds are being managed by the 19 regional opioid abatement councils. And so that is where the real responsibility for how to manage these funds falls here in Colorado. And so those 19 regional opioid abatement councils were self-formed back in 2021 and 2022, forming of, at smallest level, single county regions up to 10 county regions. And so every region here in Colorado looks very different. We've got regions as small as the city and county of Broomfield to a 10 county region from all of southeast Colorado, from Pueblo and beyond. Right, and so all of our regions have very different circumstances, but with those circumstances come different opportunities to serve and meet the needs of our communities. And so what we're here to talk about today is how can we maximize on this opportunity that this regional model presents. We know that there's a lot of burden on these regional councils to use these funds efficaciously, to find that structure that works, to find the best investment to utilize these funds, and to find a model that allows these councils to work where it's rare to have a governmental funding stream that is more than 3, 4, 5 years. We are, at least initially, we were set to receive funds through 2038. With the Purdue settlement, it is actually likely through 2041 that each of these councils will need to be in operation. And so today we are joined by 3 members of the State Colorado Opioid Abatement Council. At this panel, though, I actually look out in the audience. I believe, another 3 or 4 members of the council are here in the audience as well. And so I think this is a wonderful opportunity to have a conversation amongst representatives of the 19 regional opioid abatement councils, as well as the state opioid abatement council, to see kind of where are the emerging issues, where are the opportunities for us to learn together, and as we try to maximize these funds and serve Coloradans across the state. So with 19 different regions with different capacities and circumstances, the only way we are going to maximize these funds is from learning together. So without further ado, I want to turn it over for some introductions from my 3 Colorado Opioid Abatement Council members on the panel. And so I'll start just in order. I'll start with Terrence at the end.
Good afternoon, everybody. Terrence Gordon, retired Chief of Police in Thornton, Colorado, and member of the COAC. My interest in serving is personal, as it is for a lot of people in the room. Survivors and lived experience comes in many forms, and a lot of us do have that experience. I like to put my money where my mouth is. I am known to rant, but when I'm done complaining, I do get to work and try to close gaps and solve problems in my community.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Brandy Freeman. I am a pediatrician practicing in Aurora, Colorado, and a member of the COAC. I come to the COAC for personal and professional interests. My father, when he was living, did deal with addiction, and I kind of dealt with that in childhood. And then from a professional perspective, working with families and children who are dealing with it today, I recognize that I don't think our pediatric field does a great job. And I really want us to do better, and trying to figure out how we can do that better is part of why I'm involved with this work.
Hi, my name is Nancy Rogers. I am the city and county attorney for Broomfield, Colorado. My involvement with the opioid came before we even had a COAC. I was part of the attorney working group that helped create the MOU that defines our relationship. And I got involved because it was really important to me that we had local control. At the time, I was working for the City of Aurora as a deputy city attorney, and we wanted this to look different than the tobacco settlement. We wanted to make sure that localities had the power and the ability to utilize the majority of funds, which is the structure, as Jack mentioned, that we have today, with 70% of the funds being in more of a local control than the state control.
Thanks so much, Nancy. So I think one thing about the regional councils and the State Opioid Abatement Council that I just want to pause briefly on is the value of a broad range of experiences. So just from these 3 members on the council, we have law enforcement, treatment and pediatrician, and legal and government experience. And so it is only with all of these different voices at the table that these councils are able to bring to operate together. And so that's just one short plug from me, is that every regional opioid abatement council would be as lucky to have the composition that the State Opioid Abatement Council has. And so I recommend to every region that they look at their membership and say, who are we missing? What expertise are we missing? Because you can refresh your council. They change, and you can recreate your bylaws and adjust the membership to meet the needs of your community. So I want to pause and ask each of my council members about your work on the COAC and kind of what drives you and what kind of makes you want to do this work as well.
I think my reasons have evolved, and it's due to really this conference and getting to know people on the COAC. I got involved with this because my client city needed an attorney to work on the MOU and focus on local control. I've continued to stay involved because this is incredibly important work in every corner of the state. And hearing stories of lived experiences, living experiences, this is an issue that is going on right now, this moment, in multiple places. So I got involved for more just professional reasons. I'm staying involved because of the people that are in the COAC and you all that come to this conference.
I'm very new to the COAC. So with that statement said, I think why I got involved is I was very interested in terms of how we could use, or how these dollars were going to be used to actually impact individual people. So I wanted to see that not only in communities, there are a lot of things in healthcare where we don't have solutions, and maybe those things are getting worse in some regards. But I think this is a space where there is a way to get solutions not only from, or to get solutions from the community and see that impact and actually see it impact people.
I mentioned earlier that my reasons were personal, also professional. 30 years of seeing systems fail. I'm not pessimistic here, but, well, yes, I am. 30 years of seeing systems fail for one reason or another, and it's never because people have bad intentions. It's just because we're usually pulling in different directions. So for me, it was the money. No, we don't get paid. But that seed finally gave a lot of people in Colorado hope that we would be able to finally build some infrastructure that lasts for the next crisis. This one is going to run its course. We will, you never cross a finish line, but we will look back and say, whew, glad that's over at one point. But we can't just pat ourselves on the back and say, yay, we did it. The question that we have to ask is, what did we build so that we're ready for the next one?
Thank you, council members. So I want to ask, before I turn to the room, I would just want to ask each of you to tell me about the work of the COAC and what you have kind of done in your time and kind of the focus.
I've been on the COAC maybe a year. I think it was actually the last conference was my first kind of meeting. And I've been mainly dealing with, what's the committee that I was on, the granting one? I don't know the specific names.
Review and evaluation.
We do what Jack tells us to do.
We are grateful for Terrence Gordon's service on both the review and the evaluation committees of the council.
So I've been dealing with grants. As I mentioned, the financial investment is a big deal to me because I've seen hundreds of millions of dollars disappear. And the problems in some areas just have gotten worse. So it's been a lot of work, but it's worth it, making sure that we're investing in these little seeds all over the state that one day can grow into a statewide infrastructure, a net. And I'm tired of putting safety nets in front of the prison door and in front of the county jail. It's too late then. We missed out on so many opportunities to intervene in people's lives. So that's what's most exciting about my work with the COAC, is being able to invest in prevention and treatment and recovery, because they're both necessary.
I think I've only been on the COAC 4 or 5 months.
March?
March? Oh, it was March.
Months.
It was that far? Oh, it was that long ago. So it's been just a few months, and then I'm on the review committee. So when I think about trying to categorize what I've done, I think coming at it from actually I didn't actually say this. My other role at CU is I'm the vice chair. It's called Health Opportunities and Professional Engagement, where I have the opportunity to look at work from an equity perspective and our workforce development perspective as well. And thinking about issues of equity related to these funds, and just in terms of how they're impacting people, with some other work that I was doing. So I hope everyone picked up the flyer for the funds that are out. If not, it's outside. But looking at that, who it's going to impact in those areas where the dollars were going to be able, where the RFP is going to be able to accept grants, I think is also a really important thing in making sure that it is touching the people that it needs to touch. I think when I think about how the COAC and how Colorado's, how the regions are designed, it's really intended, I think, to reach as many people as possible, but making sure, actually Raquel said something earlier about the people closest to the problem are also closest to the solution. That was kind of paraphrasing, but I think that was very poignant for me in terms of thinking about why it's important that it is in so many areas, because our state is incredibly diverse, and which means we're going to need very diverse solutions as well. And so trying to have as many perspectives at the table and asking those questions about, well, is this going to work there, not work there? How do we do this? I think is hopefully just asking questions that help to make us think about that is what I hope I've been bringing to the COAC. They would really know, not me. But.
You are, for sure. My role has been a little bit different, and I have some of my admin committee people in the room. So with Lori and Dave, we do the administrative work. We wrote the bylaws for the COAC. And what we do now, that was at the very beginning about 3.5 years ago, what we do now is try to come up with policies and procedures to make sure we're maximizing the impact of these funds in a responsible way, which is part of our mission, but also doing it in a way, and we talk about this all the time on the admin committee, that does not create, oh, there's Erin too, wow, the whole admin committee is here. I mean, we talk about this all the time. We do not want to create extra red tape. We're trying to find that sweet spot between accountability to ensure that these funds are going to where they need to go, the type of programs that we're supporting to address this crisis, but we also just don't want to make it brutal for you. And I have to say that Erin and Lori give us some great impact to say, wait. I gotta go back to people and talk to them about this. This is way too much. This language is way too confusing. You're using too much lingo. So it's not maybe the most exciting, or I guess end work, but it's end user work. We don't want to be more red tape for you all.
So Nancy, I want to keep with you and ask, as one of our senior members of our council who has been with it since the inception and has worked with and was involved in the negotiation of the MOU, what are your recommendations to the regions after kind of 3.5 years of serving on the Colorado Opioid Abatement Council?
Jack, I didn't turn it off. I didn't think I turned it off. Okay, thank you. When Jack was doing the intro, and you start thinking about this time frame, 2038 to 2041, I mean, 2025, 26 still sounds like a fake date to me sometimes in my head. When Jack tells me that he's been here for 25 years in the United States after he moved from England, I was like, it doesn't seem that long ago, right? Like, but that is both a quick time frame, 2038, but it's also a long time frame. You need to staff up. This is not I think we know now that this is not what you can add on to somebody else's plate. And coming from a county government, where a lot of times we look at our public health staff and our human services staff and just continue to load them with one more thing. Okay, you who already have a full plate, I'm going to add the opioid settlement funds management to your plate and instituting programs and doing outreach. It's a job. It needs to be staffed appropriately. You can use settlement funds for staffing issues. So if you really want this to be long-term, and to Terrence's point, to establish an infrastructure that will last beyond this crisis and that we can utilize for future crises, you need to staff up. That would be my suggestion.
Thanks so much, Nancy. So I think with that kind of intro from our Colorado Opioid Abatement Council members, I want to open it up for a little bit more broader discussion and really want to welcome participation from all of you in the audience. And what we want to kind of dive into now are what are the emerging issues facing kind of the regions across the state? Where are the opportunities for us to learn from one another? Where are the opportunities for the Colorado Opioid Abatement Council to provide support? Are there needs for changes? And so some of the issues, for instance, that have come up just in the last year are around supplantation, right? And so the Colorado Opioid Abatement Council put out guidance, put out a recommendation lead and kind of a cheat sheet as to how to navigate supplantation, right? And so this was an issue regions were reaching out to us, kind of asking for guidance on, that we worked with the administrative committee, the assistance committee, and the review committee, which are the three permanent committees of the COAC, to develop a resource to help regions understand what are the expectations of the COAC as it relates to supplantation of funds. And so some of the other issues that we've kind of heard this year that kind of we're starting to look at into are around capital assets and indirect costs. And so, for instance, on capital assets, the Opioid Abatement Council set forth a restriction for the infrastructure share that any capital asset financed with opioid settlement funds must be used for approved purposes for a minimum of 7 years. Right? And so we know that there is a whole share of these funds, 10% of these funds, set aside for infrastructure projects, right? So we know, unlike a lot of other public funding streams, capital investments are an allowable use of these funds with opioid settlement funds, and we know there are massive gaps in infrastructure needs along the substance use continuum across our state. And so how can regions utilize these funds to meet those capital investment needs, but at the same time navigate the risks and concerns that will naturally arise behind whenever you invest in a capital asset? Right? There was an instance in which we've seen entities across the country where they've funded entities that have then shut down, right? And we don't want to see funds go to waste. We want to, if a capital asset is invested in, it needs to be used appropriately. And so I've seen multiple regions kind of have reached out to us just in the last 6 months, asking kind of how are other regions tackling this? And so I know I'll shout out Region 2, which is Larimer County, which is where we are today, actually adopted a capital asset policy that kind of sets forth kind of what are the ways that by which they will look at any investment in a capital asset, right? Are there insurance requirements? What are the terms by which it will be used? We've seen other regions have taken different approaches, right? So as I mentioned, the State Opioid Abatement Council set a minimum of 7 years for the infrastructure requirements. That is the minimum for infrastructure share. I'll do another shout out of Region 10, which is one of our sponsors today, which is Jefferson County, Clear Creek, and Gilpin counties. They had a request earlier this year for a recovery home, to purchase a recovery home. And so the region actually decided to award $1.2 million to a recovery home to purchase that facility out. And right, it was a very large investment of funds. And the region really said, how do we make sure this is an appropriate investment, that this investment is safeguarded? And so that region set a 15-year contract on that term and basically set forth that this service, we will purchase this facility, but it must be used to serve our community for 15 years, as well as run a scholarship program to serve members of the community for the next 15 years. And so this is one of those opportunities that the regions have because of the long-term kind of funding availability, as well as the structural kind of requirement that these councils exist through at minimum 2041, that you can set these long-term projects ahead and set up a unique model that meets your needs that might not traditionally align with kind of other funding streams. But that's what the opportunity that these funds create. Some of the other areas I'll just touch on briefly is indirect costs, right? How do we make sure that community-based organizations that are funded with these programs have the sufficient amount of funds they need to operate accordingly, right? We all want to reduce waste. We all don't want to see funds going to unnecessary overhead, but we also don't want to starve organizations of critical operational funding, which they need to serve our communities. So how do we find that right balance, right? And delineate kind of indirect costs from the administrative costs that are capped per the terms of the MOU. So those are just some of the issues. Kind of capital assets and direct costs in particular are areas that the council is currently looking into in hopes to kind of provide further guidance within the next year or so to help regions and local governments kind of navigate these investments. But would love to turn it to the room to hear what are the emerging challenges you are seeing in your regions. Where would you like to hear from other regions? Where would you like to hear from the State Opioid Abatement Council? Where do we need to move as we look ahead as we go into year 4 of this funding process? So I'll pause for questions, comments. Don't be shy, I will call on people. Marie. And if you wouldn't mind introducing and sharing where you are from as well.
Yes, absolutely. I'm Marie Curran. I am with Region 11. I support the Region 11 Opioid Abatement Council in Denver. And I wanted to highlight the infrastructure project challenge and not really share any useful guidance, but more so just reflecting on how helpful it would be over the next year to get more support from the COAC. I think especially because the way that our settlement funds are managed in Denver is really just defers to the standing procurement policies that the city and county of Denver has, and there isn't a lot in place that kind of can accommodate how flexible these funds are, and we've kind of had to learn that the hard way, unfortunately, that even though the settlement funds and the COAC are supportive of these larger infrastructure projects, the city isn't necessarily equipped to accommodate those things. So that's a ongoing learning process for us. But one area that I wanted, a new topic that has been top of mind for us in Denver is something what Mr. Gordon, you shared this morning, kind of that metaphor of like everyone's playing a different song in the orchestra, and just this necessity for coordination among our different systems. And I see it so much just locally within our city behavioral health systems, and then even regionally and statewide. And I'm curious if you have reflections on that, just how can we at the regional level really implement that coordination among systems so that we're not duplicating and that we're really meeting the greatest areas of need.
Thank you for asking that question, because that's all everybody has been talking about all day today. You could hear it in other, not me, but what you said. You could hear it in other conversations. Every conversation you have with somebody getting coffee, that's where the real sessions are, not in these rooms. At the coffee pots and the cookie tables, everybody's talking about system alignment and system coordination. But are we doing it? And that's where the gaps are. Again, the efforts are there, the people are there, the compassion, the love, the courage. The work is being done, but we're pulling in different directions. And there are going to be some conversations, official and unofficial, when it comes to coordination and using the regions as the levers to finally get that done. And maybe doing some other things. Jack's going to recoil in horror, because I didn't run any of this by him. But maybe doing some other things so that we can cement ourselves together as one voice to have influence in the legislature, because that is the biggest lever. All of the governor's got to sign the bills. The legislature, that's where the revenue bills are established. And we don't need more money. Again, the COAC. We don't necessarily need more than what's coming in over the next decade or so. What we need is alignment, and we need leadership. We're all here already, getting paid. We need somebody to hold the leaders accountable for working together toward the same objectives. And I have some ideas for the COACs, the regional COACs. Get in touch with me. I've been advising elected officials and candidates on policy for years. And I've been trying to push and push and push people toward integrated solutions. There is research out there that shows local grants, local granting authorities that result in programming, it doesn't work long term. It's just the start. It does not work long term. What works is integrated and coordinated legislation that drives integrated and coordinated service provision. That's what works, and we have a tremendous opportunity to get that done through the COACs and the regions.
Anything else to add? I would just add, I think one of the opportunities that the regions create is the opportunity to break down existing silos. Part of the model created through the regional opioid abatement councils was to say, if we just give each of the counties and municipalities their own share of the funds, we're not going to be able to solve these problems collectively, right? These problems do not recognize and break down at municipal or county level boundaries. And so one of the, I believe it's Exhibit G of the MOU, please don't test me on that one, sets forth kind of the recommended structure for each regional opioid abatement councils. And kind of as I touched on right at the beginning, one of the only reasons the Colorado Opioid Abatement Council functions as well as it does is because of who is sitting on that council. And I know it rings in my head still from the Montrose conference 2 years ago. I remember one of the regional facilitators sitting at the regional roundtable that we did that year and saying, I've realized after 2 years of sitting with my council, I've got the wrong people at the table. And I think that is when I look at kind of the opportunities and the challenges that I sometimes hear from regions, I sometimes think that maybe is the heart of the problem. How do you get and cultivate the right membership on your council? Because the entire intent of this model was to say, let's bring together human services, law enforcement, public health, direct health, education, you name it, together into a collective decision-making process, right? To bring together the governmental, the non-governmental, the community members together. And so these ROACs, as Chief Gordon kind of mentioned, can be a lever for this action through bringing together what may be disparate groups and disparate actors into a way that can convene with a funding stream that can bridge the gaps that may exist between those silos. So I think there is such an opportunity on these ROACs, but it is a huge burden that the ROACs have to really evaluate themselves and to say, do I have the right composition? And one of the best opportunities you have, and I know many regions in the room have done this, is to reevaluate their councils, to refresh their memberships, to change their composition, to meet their needs and to meet the opportunity. See a question in the back. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Dr. Chelsea. I'm the program manager for Region 10, Jefferson, Gilpin, and Clear Creek counties. It's not a question so much as it is a pointed response to Jack's initial question, kind of piggybacking off of Marie and Brandy's comments to staff. Region 10 was the first region to have a standard operating procedures manual when I joined the council last October, and that was published in February. So in regards to staffing and how ROACs do business, what we need explicitly from the COAC is a governance toolkit. If we were to staff someone, what does that position look like? Are they a grant administrator? Are they a grant manager? Do they do both? What is their role? External consulting firms don't have immediate access to county procurement offices. So what does that fiscal agency relationship policy look like? Again, Region 10 is the only region that has one, and that guidance really should be coming from the state, not necessarily me. And then the second, so that was, again, just a very pointed of what we need from you folks. The second thing is I'm actually doing an analysis of the facilitator work groups over the last year and what those emerging needs are for an agenda setting paper. And one of the things that has come up is that how do we monitor each other, and how do we prevent duplicative funding, and how do we create cross-regional collaborations if we don't have a dashboard from the state that announces what those awards are? So it's up to the individual program managers. Like, I have to email Marie saying, hey, I know that you fund this organization. I'm concerned it might be duplicative funding. Can we have a meeting? Where if we had a state dashboard announcing every single award, not just the expense, then we would have that in of who to contact or know off the bat that the awards are extremely different. So we're not doing duplicative funding. So those are just some, again, not a question, but 2 pointed responses of what the ROACs need from the COAC. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chelsea. Really good to see you. Appreciate all your work you're doing for Region 10. And I think, I think there are challenges, when it comes to kind of being able to set up that model. I think, as Nancy mentioned earlier, one of the real intents of this model was to not create unnecessary red tape, and so one of the underlying kind of principles of the MOU was to really kind of have almost a trust but verify kind of process in which the funds are really given a lot of discretion to the regions to find their ways to distribute those funds, and it's really up to the regions if they want that kind of model, because the COAC doesn't have the power to tell you that you have to disclose all that in advance, right? And we know there are regions that are less resourced in this capacity, that might be a strain on. But I think there's definitely opportunities for us to bring regions better together, to coordinate those funding streams, and to ensure, especially as we talk about supplantation, avoiding duplication of funds, I think there's definitely opportunity there, and I'd love to chat more with you about that as we move forward, Chelsea. So,
hey, Jack.
Yep.
I just wanted to add another piece. I definitely appreciate that your region has created the SOPs and done that. That's so awesome. And I will tell you that it's on being the co-chair of the administrative committee, it's on my list. But I will also say, you're going to be my first phone call, because I agree with you that we can help, we can put resources to creating a state toolkit that other people could follow, but we're going to rely heavily on regions where it's working or what's not working. I know Lori on the admin committee is so helpful with her perspective from a regional administrator or a county commissioner that works with the administrator. If you waited for us to come up with it, it's not going to be something that works for the regions, respectfully to the committee, right? So if you have other examples of, we don't have it all figured out, but we have a rock star policy, give it to a member of the administrative committee and we'll work on it to add to that toolkit, because that's a great suggestion.
Thanks so much, Nancy. Yeah, and I think on your note around the role between the facilitator and the fiscal agent, I think something, if you've talked to me about this work, I often say that regional councils rely on 3 distinct roles. They rely on the support staff that kind of helps the councils operate. They rely on the council members and the leadership to actually lead and facilitate the councils themselves. And they rely on the fiscal agent staff to facilitate the distribution of funds. If you don't have all 3 of those roles well-staffed, filled out, and kind of coordinating together, there will be cracks that appear. And I know that every region, in one area or another has had growing pains. And I think, to Nancy's point, while the COAC has similarities in its design to the ROACs, it is not a region. It is very distinctly right. We don't have the same responsibilities for distributing funds as the regions have. We don't have the same fiscal agent relationship that the regions have with the Department of Law. And so I think it really, one of the opportunities that this model creates is it creates 19 different regions that can learn and kind of collectively peer learn together. And I think it's only through kind of these kind of conversations and sharing your learnings and kind of bringing that together that we can all maximize these funds and meet the needs of us all together. Other questions, comments? Liz?
Yeah, thank you. I think that's a really important comment. I just wanted to comment on that first. Having done a lot of work trying to consolidate some effort to get some statewide data infrastructure in place, that was a regional, that was something that started at the regional level, and it was a struggle to have a lot of conversations and figure out if there was a consensus amongst the regions to figure out if we could get some support from the COAC. And so I'm really, that's making me think about if there's like a formalized structure that might help facilitate some of these requests that are really difficult to execute at the regional level, but we might just need the COAC to help us communicate and connect to see like what can we do about this need, or does somebody have a resource? So that was the one. I think that I'm trying to figure out how to ask this question without getting myself into trouble. But because I want to acknowledge on this front, especially with substance abuse and opioids, what the Attorney General's office has constructed through these regional councils and the COAC has been remarkable and very successful. We also have another state agency, the Behavioral Health Administration. And so, Terrence, when you were saying we need legislation, we need, these types of efforts, I also think about the right hand not talking to the left hand when it comes to these two governing institutions. And so, it's a big open question for me because that organization has been evolving. And they're also, in many ways, they overlap with the same mission that we do. And so is there a way that we can coordinate or cooperate closer there?
Yeah, so I know our office is in very close interactions with the Behavioral Health Administration and regularly meets with them, probably at least once or twice a month at least. And so I think that has always been our effort to avoid duplicate. I think we would have loved to have seen similar regional maps appear with the BHAs as with the regional opioid abatement councils. Unfortunately, those maps are a little bit different. And so we do feel for kind of our local commissioners working with multiple different maps and regions. And so we do understand that is a challenge, but I think the BHA, as we all have experienced, has been a new entity that has grown and developed and is really kind of hitting its stride as we see kind of in recent years. And so I think we are committed to continuing to coordinate our efforts and trying to align both on data, but also on funding and outcomes and whatnot. But it is a challenge, and I think there is also a intentional design to the opioid settlement funds here in Colorado that intentionally kind of separated this funds from traditional state structure with good reason to give power to the local governments. And so there is, I think, a natural friction, unfortunately, that will always exist between these state opioid settlement funds and state because the power really was invested outside of the state government's control. But I think it's on all of us, to both the COAC and the regions, to ensure that we continue alignment, that we don't duplicate funding. As Kristen Bates and Kristen Pendergrass both said, that we don't charge things that can be charged to Medicare, and we ensure that we are using these funds in the most sustainable way. But I don't have an easy answer for you on that, but I know that is something we are truly committed to at the Attorney General's office.
Jack, you answered that a lot better than I would have. And you answered it very well. The issue is the Attorney General can't tell the rest of the state what to do. And that's the big issue. Strategic alignment in government, you can't even say those words in the same sentence without being afraid of getting struck by lightning. And this is not a platitude, it's not a slogan. Leadership is the answer to every long-term strategy. And that's why when I talk about legislation, I'm not talking about new laws that say you need this program, that program, this is the continuum of care. I'm talking about legislation that requires the state agencies and the county agencies that they fund to work toward the same objectives. We don't have that, but we can. We have a tremendous amount of influence at this conference. We have a tremendous amount of influence back in our communities. And we can, if we all want the same things from treatment and recovery. Now let's say that we all want the same things from policy. And our voices then can echo across the state. And our legislatures, again, they're good people. They will listen as long as we can provide the right incentive structure. It takes a good 10 years for a human services programming to become a part of like a community culture. But the mean time in service in the state legislature is 6 years. Why the hell do they care about something that's happening beyond their time frame? So we've got to kind of change that incentive structure and make it we've got to we have to show them the rewards, the benefits of aligning systems and not responding to the latest political or moral panic. But it can be done.
Thank you, Chief Gordon. So I know we're coming up on our final 7 minutes, so I want to see if there's any final questions or comments from the audience, and then I'll turn it to council for final close. Tucker.
I just want to, first off, I'm Tucker Yerman, Region 6, Boulder County. I use he, him pronouns. I just want to do a huge appreciation for all the peer learning that has happened over the last couple of years with this funding source, and a huge shout out to Dr. Chelsea and Marie for all the help. We have Boulder County recently adopted standard operating procedures, and bringing it back to the COAC, super appreciative of the guiding values and principles that you came out with. Boulder County adopted those as our regional guiding principles, and as support staff, we are really looking to lean on those guiding principles and move into a more values-driven process. And looking at our COAC members that we have today and the incredible leaders around the room that have been here, I think my question is really when, as support staff, we encounter leaders that continue to reinforce the same systems that we're talking about today, the status quo that continues to uphold inequities for certain communities, and us as support staff are continuing to butt up against those members of even our ROAC that are resistant to, for example, bringing people with lived experience as permanent members of our ROAC, and really hoping that our guiding principles will be a step in the right direction. And we as support staff have really had to take kind of a Marine Corps approach to improvise, adapt, and overcome to get to those goals that we really see that are the right way to do this. But for our leaders at the state level and from across the state, what would you recommend in your experience from the different sectors you come from to approach those leaders we encounter that are still kind of stuck in the way things have always been done, or have that plaque from experience of a lifetime of the careers they've had?
I will say this very respectfully to my elected officials. Tell them that others are doing it. The COAC's doing it. We have lived and living experience involved in leadership, and start to show, because whenever we're trying to get my council to approve a new ordinance, we always list all the other cities and counties that have that ordinance. So I think if you're doing it, share it loud. But I think you go back and say, you know what was the most moving thing about this conference? The involvement in leadership from people with lived and living experience. And it'll happen. I mean, it's a marathon. This is a marathon. You'll get there, I promise.
Actually, I was going to say something very similar, so I'm trying to figure out something else to say at the moment. Because honestly, that's how first, when I've had difficult issues in healthcare, that it is that kind of example of whether it's showing the competitor or whoever else is doing it. And, people like to be on the right side of history. And so how can you make sure that that is going to serve their leadership goals in that way?
So I think we have multiple regions that are leading. I know Denver, Larimer, I'm sure there are others as well that have kind of started doing the work of compensating and really building roles for those individuals who've lived and living experience, and but there's still work to be done, as we know. So I think with just 3 minutes to spare, I'd love to turn just to my council members, just for any closing reflections.
I talk a lot, not outside of professional settings, but I'm just going to say one thing, and it's in my notes. So I want to say it right. To the regions, you won't be able to do everything that you want to do, even given 10, 12, 13 years. But every one of you with the right focus, the right strategic focus, and the right partners at the table can build something that lasts. And that's got to be the goal, not just to put out this fire, but something that lasts to prevent the ones that are coming down the road.
I would close with, just as a still very new member of the COAC, I appreciate the learning and wisdom that come from the regions, and look forward to working with the regions to better understand and then impact communities. I think it is really the diversity of our state that is going to help us find good solutions, and the way we it's been organized is going to allow us to do that.
There will be cracks, and there will be failures, and you'll feel like 5 steps forward, 3 steps back. But we are all moving forward. I think A.G. Weiser said it this morning. It was on a slide. Like, we need to recognize how far we've come. We still have a lot of work to do, but it can get overwhelming. And being okay with those failures and pivoting. Okay, that didn't work. I know on our committee we're like, that didn't work. We need to pivot. We need to change. It's okay if something didn't work right, and because there will be cracks. And if you think of that old adage that, you'll have a beautiful vase at the end of this, and it'll have cracks, and you'll be able to see the cracks, but it'll be a beautiful, beautiful vase, a beautiful program.
Thank you, my council members. Can I get a round of applause for my council members? So I just want to say in closing, I just want to say thank you all to you are the ones doing the work here across the state of Colorado. I think the Colorado opioid, I'm not going to speak on behalf of my abatement council members here, but I'm guessing if I was to guess what they'd be thinking, they would say something very similarly, that you are the ones doing the work at the local level, and it is, as Nancy said, we can learn from you. And so we want to support, we want to facilitate the peer learning. The mission of the COAC, it's literally in it to facilitate peer learning to maximize the funds received. And so wherever role we can play to connect the dots, to help you connect to another region, to learn from one another, to share those amazing resources that I know I regularly reach out to regions like, hey, I've got a region looking for this. I know I've seen this. I know Tucker put together some amazing trackers that I've shared with our regions, Chelsea's standing operating procedures, and so on. And so we can do this only together. And so I just want to call to you all to reach out to us. We are here to support. Reach out to Colorado Opioid Abatement Council members. Reach out to my team, which is the support staff to the Abatement Council. And more so, reach out to one another, because you are the support network that will facilitate this work. So thank you all for joining us again this year, and I hope to see you again soon. Then we'll probably be getting an announcement from the intercom shortly, but we'll be heading to the Mountain Holly for our closing for the afternoon, which will be starting at 4 p.m. So be on the lookout for those intercoms.